Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Um, I hope you all are doing well. I did want to start off by saying I know it's been almost 7 months since I last posted here, so I did want to apologize for that. Um, I could say I've been busy, and I guess I have been, but I don't know if that'd be a valid excuse considering I have not posted since September. So, yeah, because I know I had said that I would make, how to score a 5 on, AP, I guess for this video, econ, lang, physics, some other things. Um, I do still plan on doing those, hopefully before this year's AP exams roll out. Apologize if I don't, but yes. Um, but yeah, I thank you for bearing with me and being patient with me. Even over those 7 months where I've been inactive, we managed to hit like 100 subscribers. Like I think initially, like in September, we were at like maybe 35, 40 or so. Right now we're at 109. That's crazy. So thank you guys so much for, you know, bearing with me. Yeah, I know that, 100, subscribers doesn't really, to many it might not seem like much, but to me, having a tight-knit community of scholars, however big or small the group happens to be, um, I don't know, it just seems like very rewarding to me. So thank you for bearing with me and being patient with me in that respect. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, I don't know. I think with that out of the way, I will get into probably more what you were looking for when you clicked on this video, um, which is how to score a 5 on the AP Econ, AP Economics exams. So that being said, I will be going over how to score a 5 on the AP Macroeconomics and or the AP Microeconomics, depending on if you're taking one or the other, or both. So I know some people tend to take them both together in a given year. So I will be going over both of them. Though it must be said, I have not taken the AP Macro exam yet. I'm taking it a month from today, actually. I think a month from yesterday when I'll be posting this video. But um, I have already taken the AP Micro exam. So just to give you a little bit of background, I did end up taking the AP Microeconomics exam last year, 2020. So despite them being condensed, I was able to earn a 5 on it. So I feel like I can give you some guidance in terms of how to earn that 3, 4, or ultimately that 5, if that's what you're shooting for. Of course, I know you. I know you all are more than capable of earning it. I believe in you. So, if you want to know how to get there, how to earn the 5 on these exams, then stick with me, and we'll go over how to do that together. All right. So the first thing I do want to go over is the general format of the exam or exams. They both AP Economics exams have the same format. So both of them are 130 minutes long. Um, so that means they're both 2 hours, 10 minutes. So the first section you'll take is the multiple choice. The multiple choice comprises 2/3 of your score. The second section, the FRQs, they comprise 1/3 of your score. So you'll have to do 60 multiple choice questions in 70 minutes and 3 FRQs in an hour. So yeah, I mean, I will say with this exam, there isn't a huge time crunch so long as you know your stuff. Of course, if you don't, it might be a little bit more challenging, but obviously, you don't want to be spending like 5 minutes on a given multiple choice question, but at the same time, you have plenty of ample time. Like, you don't have to be rushing through the questions at all by any means, um, so long as you're moving at a steady pace. Especially if you're taking the digital exams this year, too, because you won't be able to go back to previous questions. So if you're spending like 5 minutes on some of the earlier questions, you're taking some significant chunks of time away from, you know, being able to see and do the other questions. And you want to answer all the questions because you don't lose points for incorrect answers. You only gain points for correct answers. And, that's true for all AP exams. So yeah, make sure to be moving at a steady pace. But yeah, and I should mention, so on the FRQ section, this goes back to the format of the exam. The FRQ section, like I said, you have 3 FRQs to do. The first of which will be a long FRQ. So pretty much pretty much every single long FRQ on the AP exam is going to be something where you're graphing something. So it's pretty much always going to start with draw a correctly labeled graph of XYZ. Draw a correctly labeled graph of, whatever the case may be. I can't even think of an example where that has not been the case. It's always going to be you graphing something. If you're taking the digital exam, that's going to be a little bit different. Can't really speak much on that. I'm just kind of assuming you're taking the in-person paper exam. But if not, you'll probably be asked to interpret graphs instead of graphing them. But you're going to want to know the graphs regardless. So that's what I would say. The other two FRQs, needless to say, are the short FRQs. So you might have to graph some things for those FRQs, but I think they're mostly going to be conceptual questions. So that's just something to keep in mind for those questions of the exam. All right, so now I want to go over the important concepts to know for the AP Economics exams. All right, so I kind of changed my setup a little bit, but here are the different units for the AP Macroeconomics exam. Um, I won't read them all out to you because I guess I know you all can either pause the video if need be, take a screenshot. But this is the AP Macroeconomics course and exam description. It's page, uh, as you can see with my mouse here, it's page 25. So just go to page 25 of the AP course and exam description for AP Macro to see these. Kind of gives you kind of gives you the breakdown of which units are most important to know. So like here, we see that like the long run consequences of stabilization policies, that'd be like, I haven't really gotten this far in the course yet, but it would, to my knowledge anyway, be stuff like Phillips curve and, oh gosh, like monetary policy, I believe, in the money market. So that's probably going to comprise the majority of the exam. We can also see that stuff like aggregate demand, short run, aggregate supply, stuff from Unit 3 will also be really important as well as Unit 4. So like these are the kind of the meat of this course, if you will. So yeah, I guess that's important to know. So this is definitely worth checking out just so you know what to expect come exam day. And here, I just switched tabs. Here we have some of the big things to know for the AP Microeconomics exam. So here are the 6 different units of study. As you can see, both macro and micro have 6 units of study. In fact, the first one is the same name, although the concepts are, there's a lot of overlap. They're a little bit different though, in terms of weighting for one, and in terms of what they cover. Like I know micro covers more like elasticity that um, macro doesn't cover. But as you can see here, the most important units are going to be these two right here. Unit 2, supply and demand, price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, cost curves, perfect competition, and I can definitely speak to that. When I took the digital exam, despite it only being 45 minutes, I think I was asked I was definitely asked about perfect competition and cost curves a lot, but like profit maximization, I was asked about that specific concept twice. So yeah, I would argue that the most important concept in all of microeconomics would be profit maximization, finding the profit maximizing quantity, and finding the profit maximizing uh, price. So I think it's important to note this. And again, this is also on page 25 of the AP Microeconomics course and exam description. That will be in the description for you as well if you choose to look at that. All right, I am back to full screen now. But anyway, so I guess now to get more specifically into, more in-depth tips for the exam. Really, I don't have a whole lot. I mean, it's relatively straightforward. Like, there aren't very many things to keep in mind for this exam in order to do well on it. At least, I don't think so. I mean, it boils down to a couple big things. Probably the biggest and most important of which would be knowing the graphs. That is by far probably the most important thing to keep in mind when you're preparing for and taking the AP Economics exams or exam, whichever one or ones you're taking. But yes, you'll want to know all of the graphs like the back of your hand because, well, for one, on the FRQs, you are always, 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 always going to be asked to draw 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. You're going to be asked to draw probably several graphs. So you're going to want to know them. For instance, I know for AP Macro specifically, they consistently ask questions or ask you questions in terms of graphing like the loan, I think what they call it, like the loanable funds market, or like the aggregate demand curve and short run aggregate supply, stuff like that. And for micro, you'll often be asked to graph like monopoly, monopsony, or perfect competition. I probably think is probably the most common. But yeah, you're gonna want to know how to graph them, regardless. So just know all of the graphs. And I think also on the AP course and exam descriptions for AP Macro and AP Micro, respectively, towards the end in the appendices, they also have all of the graphs you need to know. So go check out those links that I put in the description and make sure you know those graphs. If you don't already know all of them, just go check them out so you know what to expect come exam day and what you're going to be expected to graph. So I think that's important to note. I suppose too, if you know those graphs, those points in the FRQs should be pretty straightforward to earn. You might as well take advantage of the low-hanging fruit and earn those points just by knowing and memorizing. Well, hopefully not memorizing. Hopefully you're able to make sense of the graphs too, to where you're not just mindlessly memorizing them. Like hopefully they just kind of logically make sense to you, and you can reason through why they look the way they do. So that's kind of important to know. Also, you may not necessarily realize this, but knowing your graphs are also important to ensure success on the multiple choice questions. And you're like, well, why would that be? Because, I'm not going to be asked to graph something for a multiple choice question. I mean, I'm just circling an answer, right, and bubbling it in. Well, I mean, I guess especially when you're being asked about something like shifting demand or supply, or aggregate demand or aggregate supply, um, especially when you have like a double shift occurring, like supply and demand both moving at the same time, it may be helpful to you to graph it out just to see what's happening to equilibrium price and what's happening to equilibrium quantity. Um, just because you may not be able to visualize it or just know the answer right away. So if a multiple choice question is asking you for what happens to equilibrium price or equilibrium quantity when supply shifts this way or demand shifts this way, it might be important just to draw a graph out and see for yourself. Then you can kind of confirm your answer. So it can help for the multiple choice too. You won't get points explicitly for doing this, but you might, increase the probability that you end up getting that question right just because you're, more certain of your answer. So I would definitely know the graphs not only for the FRQs but also for the multiple choice. So it's kind of a general tip I would have for both economics exams, for both parts of the exams. So, and also I guess while we're on the topic of like shifting supply and demand curves, just know that whenever, always, 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 whenever you have a double shift, like supply and demand shifting at the same time, you're always going to have something indeterminate. So if you have a double shift and there's an answer choice that doesn't mention anything indeterminate, it's wrong, I promise you. So if you have a double shift, like both curves moving at the same time, this is supposed to be supply and demand, but you're always going to have something indeterminate. Remember that if both curves, both supply and demand, are moving in the same direction, since quantity is your horizontal axis, quantity is going to be determinate, but your price is going to be indeterminate, and vice versa. So if they're moving in opposite directions, you can see since price is your vertical axis, you can see the equilibrium where they're intersecting is determinate for price, but it wouldn't be determinate for quantity. So if they're moving in opposite directions, indeterminate quantity. They're moving in the same direction, indeterminate price. I'll get into this actually in a little bit when I go over a practice question with you. Also, one more thing about graphs. Actually, not one more thing. I'm probably going to get more into this later, but please, 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 when you're doing your FRQs, label everything in your graphs. Label everything you do. Like your axes, label your axes. Actually, I heard this tip from an AP Daily video from Miss, what was her name? It's Ray Fields, I believe. It was in one of the earlier videos for Unit 3 on AP Daily. Um, she said, like, she gave the acronym ACE, so ACE. Um, so A being axes, and this pertains to when you're graphing, like the things to keep in mind while you're graphing. Um, A is your axes, so label your axes. C pertains to your curves. I'd also say C for changes, any shifts. Make sure you're using arrows to denote any shifts in the curves, and then also labeling the curves themselves. And then E would be equilibrium points. So equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, probably most notably. Or I guess for macro, for instance, like if you have price level or real GDP, stuff like that. So make sure you're labeling literally everything. So axes, curves, shifts, the curves, everything. I think I said that twice, but you get what I mean. Please label everything. If you do not label, you will not get any credit. I promise you. They're not going to be able to make sense of it, and they're not going to be able to assess your knowledge of the graphs and the content if you don't specifically, deliberately label everything. So please label everything. It's a pretty simple way to earn points, just knowing how to label them, but there are certainly students who forget to do so and then end up not earning those points, unfortunately. So just be sure to do that. All right, well, let's take a little bit of a break from graphs because, yeah, I know, but they do comprise a big portion of the AP Econ exam. But in terms of like study resources, I would highly recommend Jacob Clifford's YouTube channel. So I'm actually gonna just go there really quick right now. All right, so here you can kind of see I'm just kind of on his like playlists portion of his YouTube channel, but you can kind of see like all of his playlists. Like he has Macro Unit 6. They kind of go backwards. Macro 5, Macro 4. Really, I mean it's a little out of order, but I mean I think it's based on like the last videos he posted. It's based on recency, not necessarily the order of the units, but you kind of get the point. I mean it's pretty easy to find what you're looking for, and he has videos on pretty much every single concept you could possibly want to know for the AP Economics exams. He also has an AP Ultimate Review packet. Um, I think it's on his About tab. Yeah, right here. So links here. There's an review packet you can look at. I think you'll have to pay for it, but um, I can't speak from experience. I didn't really use the review packet, but um, I would definitely recommend, if not checking out the review packet, definitely check out some of his videos. They're very helpful. I use them quite a bit too. Well, more so cram for the exam, but um, yeah, they're very helpful. So I definitely recommend them. All right, I'm back to full screen. But now I want to chat review books. So, okay, I did get both of them. I got both the Princeton review and the Barron's for AP Econ. I will say, okay, so when I was self-studying for AP Micro last year, I pretty much exclusively used the Barron's. I marked it up a little bit. I think I was, yeah, I guess more towards the end of the micro stuff. Like, oh yeah, see, like I marked up some pages and stuff. But the funny thing is, about 20 minutes before I actually ended up taking the digital exam, um, I looked at the Princeton review for like the first or second time ever and realized that it actually would probably have been more beneficial if I had just used that one. So, just because when I was going through the Barron's review book, and don't get me wrong, it was actually pretty decent for econ, but a lot of the concepts that they introduced was not like they didn't really introduce the concepts. I don't feel like in as logical of an order as the Princeton review book. I think just reading the Princeton review book, it just clicked a lot faster for me. Um, but yeah, I think Barron's just tends to make things a little bit more obscure, and they tend to go a lot more in depth than what they probably need to, which can be good in that you'd be over learning the content and over preparing, but at the same time, it makes it a little bit more confusing. Like especially like for me, because I was self studying it, I didn't really have any background knowledge when I was looking at it or when I was first reading it. So they kind of assume that you already kind of know some things about, general economics. Seemed like that anyway. Um, but yeah, I think the Princeton review explains things in a lot more clear and organized and a way that clicked with me more. But that's just my personal opinion. You can definitely get both because I know that both books only have one exam for micro and one exam for macro. So if you want to practice more than one, mock exam, there's definitely a benefit to getting both of them. They're both good. I just tend to prefer the Princeton review in terms of their organization and um, the way in which they explain the content. So I personally would go with the Princeton review. However, it's totally up to you. They're both very valid choices. So yeah, hopefully that helps in making your selection, if you choose to get one, that is. Okay, so now I do want to go over an example practice multiple choice question from again, the AP course and exam descriptions for one for macro, one for micro. So I think the macro one yeah, I'm going to do the macro one first. All right, so I'm back to screen recording my computer. So hopefully this question looks a little bit familiar to something I'd already mentioned. I mean, unless you kind of skipped later in the video. If you skip the intro, that's totally fine. We'll still go over this together. But this question says, which of the following changes would result in an indeterminate change? That's important. So indeterminate change. I love that I can mark this up. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I don't know. I like that feature. Anyway, so yes, we are looking for an indeterminate change in the equilibrium price in a perfectly competitive market. So if we're looking for something indeterminate, and we're talking supply and demand here in a perfectly competitive market, immediately know if we're looking for which of the following is going to result in an indeterminate change in anything, in this case price, we know automatically it cannot be D and it cannot be E. Why? Because it says no change in. No change in. So D is implying a single shift and E is implying a single shift. We know that single shifts, like a shift in just demand or a shift in just supply, is not going to cause an indeterminate change. Because if we have just one curve shifting, we know exactly what's happening to our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price in relation to the original equilibrium quantities and prices. So those cannot possibly be the answer choices in this case. And really, if you want to draw a graph here, it would definitely work to your advantage. However, we can also use process of elimination here. Why? Because, well, let's just look at the answers. So A implies an increase in demand and a decrease in supply. So we have one of the curves increasing, one of the curves decreasing. Oh gosh, I don't know why I drew that so slow and it's not a straight line. But then we have B, an increase in demand and an increase in, oops, gosh, I'm sorry. And there we go. Okay, increase in both curves. And then C is an increase in supply, but a decrease in demand. So both choices A and C involve a decrease in one of the curves and an increase in the other. And we know that, both A and C can't be correct. So it really has to be answer choice B here. And this makes sense because remember, if we have, here, I'm gonna go full screen for a second here. So, okay, so if you have a supply and demand curve here, and it's kind of weird because I have to mirror this, so I have to make sure I'm doing this right. But if we have both of them moving in the same direction, remember, price is our, I guess it'd be on this side. So price is going to be our vertical axis, and quantity is going to be our horizontal axis. So we have both curves moving in the same direction. Well, what do we know? We know quantity, if it's our horizontal axis, it's definitely changing, right? Like we know which direction it's going to be changing. It's like if both curves go this way, we know that quantity moves this way too. If both curves are moving this way, which would be to your right, I believe, we know what's happening to quantity, but the price is indeterminate. Whereas if we have both curves moving in opposite directions, I guess it'll look like that. We know that our price, like from here to here, our price is getting higher. Our price is increasing because the point at which these curves are intersecting is increasing, or it could decrease. But we don't know what's happening to quantity. Therefore, if the curves are moving in opposite directions, quantity is indeterminate. So A and C, if I go back here, so A and C again must be indeterminate changes in equilibrium quantity. B must be a change in equilibrium price. So B is our answer in this case. All right, now I'm going to move to the sample question for AP Micro. All right, this one's a bit more specific to micro, obviously, but because the last question we just did for AP Macro would easily be something you could also be assessed on for AP Micro as well. So this particular question pertains to cross-price elasticity of demand, and also takes that concept and synthesizes it with complements and substitutes, which I suppose are directly related to cross-price elasticity of demand. So the first thing I want you to notice, well actually, you can pause the video if you want to read through the question and the answer choices first. I'll give you a moment to do that if you want to. All right. And okay, I won't read all these to you, but assuming you've read the question and the answer choices, I do want to bring your attention to the latter portion of all of these answer choices. Basically, just is asking us whether bologna and cheese are complement goods or substitute goods. So remember, these terms are kind of self-explanatory. The name kind of gives them away, but complements are goods that, well, complement each other. They they come in pairs almost, like wine and wine glasses, hot dogs and hot dog buns. They're consumed together, they're paired together. Whereas substitutes, as the name implies, are goods that replace one another. For example, apples or pears, those would be substitute goods, or Milky Way and Snickers, like, or Coke and Pepsi, although that's a bigger debate, I think. Some people would argue that those aren't substitutes, but remember, they don't have to be like perfect substitutes for one another. But they have to, in essence, serve the same purpose, if that makes sense. In this case, though, bologna and cheese. Bologna and cheese. What type of good, or I guess pair of goods, do you think bologna and cheese would be? Well, I would think, if you're making a sandwich of some sort, you typically want, some sort of meat and some sort of cheese. So you want them together. You want them in conjunction with one another. You wouldn't replace cheese with bologna. You would want them together. So these would be complement goods. So we can already eliminate B, D, and E because they all imply that they are substitute goods. And we just claimed that they are not. And they are in fact not. I will tell you that it's not B, D, or E. All right. Now we have to, well, I guess it's actually important to note here that we use process of elimination and we didn't even do any calculation yet. So I guess pro tip there. So now we do actually need to use cross-price elasticity of demand here. So remember, if you haven't gotten this far in the course yet or just don't remember, no worries. Remember that the formula for CPED, cross-price elasticity of demand, is the percent, sorry, I'm writing with my mouse, so it's not going to be super neat, but it'd be the percent change in QD, Q sub D, so quantity demanded, over the percent change in price. And remember, the percent change in quantity demanded and the percent change in price, these are not referring to the same good. They're referring to either complements or substitutes. They're going to be two different goods we're describing here. In this case, the problem tells us that our percent change in quantity demanded is a 5% decrease for the quantity demanded of cheese. So we want to put 5% as our quantity demanded. Or more specifically, notice that it's a 5% decrease. So let's put a negative sign there. Let's be appropriate with our signage. Now let's notice that there's a 2% increase in the price of bologna. So it's a positive 2%. So negative 5 divided by 2, let's change that to a decimal. Let's make that negative 2.5. So hopefully that's what you got. Should be answer choice C. Now be careful. Remember that percent change in quantity demanded goes in the numerator, because if you were to flip these numbers around and get negative or positive 2 over negative 5, you would have gotten this first answer choice. So make sure you have your formula straight. So yeah, I guess it was a little bit tricky though, trying to throw you off with that one. So I'll erase that. But yeah, just be really careful, know your formulas, know your vocabulary in this case too, with complements and substitutes, and you should be just fine for the multiple choice. But hopefully this example kind of helps give you an idea what to expect. Also, be sure to look at the AP course and exam description for more examples like this. Alright, so now that I'm back in full screen, I wanted to give you guys some tips on preparing for the FRQs. More specifically, I know I kind of already touched on that, but yeah, before I get into some like actual FRQ examples, I just want to give you some, a couple final tips for them. So, first of all, again, with regards to the 10-minute planning period, definitely take advantage of it. As economics students, you probably are familiar with opportunity costs. Just think, would those 10 minutes be best spent actually reading and skimming the questions, or do I maybe want to take 5 minutes to read and skim the questions and then get a 5-minute head start on um, actually doing the FRQs? Just know that you probably don't need all 10 minutes. Certainly you could plan and skim all the questions and use all 10 minutes if you want to, but personally, I mean, you're not reading paragraphs upon paragraphs for the FRQs, so perhaps you could maybe limit your planning and of skimming the questions period to 5 minutes instead, and use your time to use your additional 5 minutes to get a head start. But that's totally up to you. That's just kind of the way I anticipate doing the AP macro exam that I'm going to take in a month. But I don't know. It's totally up to you. Just something to keep in mind. But yeah, definitely though, just so that you know what works best for you, please, please, please take practice FRQs. Again, go to the College Board website, go look at their past AP macro or micro FRQs. Take really as many of them as you can. You cannot possibly take too many. So know which method works for you and how you take those FRQs best. And make sure to do all 3 of them in one sitting, because you're going to be doing that for the AP exam. Just try to mimic your testing environment as closely as you can. Try not to use your notes, stuff like that. Just something to keep in mind. My next tip for FRQs more specifically would be to not over-explain anything. Like, definitely you want to explain your answers, especially when they're asking for when, I don't know, supply decreases, what happens to the equilibrium price, something like that. Or if aggregate demand shifts this way, what happens to unemployment? Something like that. You're definitely not going to get credit just by justifying or just by identifying what's happening to the quantity of focus. You also want to explain why, but don't explain anything beyond what they're looking for. Your explanations usually will not be more than 2, maybe 3 sentences. So just keep that in mind. Don't write full essays, because you will get points off. Well, no, you won't get points off. You just won't get the point, because you don't lose points per se. You start with 0 points and they just give you points for valid answers. But you will not earn a point if you contradict yourself. So don't over-explain yourself to where you're forgetting what the question's even asking and you're contradicting yourself. Don't do that, because you will not earn a point if you contradict yourself. And even from different parts of the same question, if you graph something like a leftward shift in something and you explain it as a rightward shift, that's, you're contradicting yourself, so you're not going to get that second point in the subsequent question or subsequent part, because you contradicted yourself. If you provide incorrect information, though, you may still earn the point if your answer to the actual question is correct, but if you contradict yourself, you definitely will not earn the point. So just be really careful of that. Just answer the question. Just tell them what specifically they're looking for, and just be straight up with your answer. Even if you're unsure of whether something is increasing or decreasing or what's happening with what, just sound confident in your answer and stick with it. and stick with that answer for the subsequent questions. Just go with something. I mean, you have a 50-50 chance. That is, of course, if you have a valid explanation. But yeah, just give a straight up answer. Don't over explain. But next, I just want to go over what I call the big three of the FRQs. I kind of just made it up. Well, not really. I mean, the idea of, yeah, the concept of the big three, yeah. But I guess you can kind of form an acronym with it, VEG, like veg, like vegetable, or VEG, veg. But it's vocabulary, equations, and graphs. So when I say vocabulary, I mean for the FRQs, make sure to watch your language. I don't necessarily mean in terms of profanity. Of course, don't use profanity in your FRQs, but I mean more in terms of not mixing up similar sounding economics terms, especially in my experience, especially with AP macro. So don't say money like in your FRQs when you mean to say something else. Like it's okay to say money in your FRQs, like the term money, so long as it's the correct term. Because in everyday language we use that term all the time, but we also use like wealth and income. From an economics standpoint, those aren't the same thing. So, like, don't say money when you mean to say wealth or income or assets, especially with assets, like with bonds, which tend to be more illiquid than other types of assets, other types of financial assets. Um, don't mix like those terms up. Be formal, and like just yeah, like politically correct, so to speak. Um, when you're doing the FRQs, make sure you're using the right terminology. Um, and yeah, that's kind of what I would say for that. Now, I do want to direct your attention to the 2018 FRQs for the AP Macro and AP Micro exams. I won't actually go over them with you just because that would, take a little bit, take a little while because they're pretty detailed. But I just kind of want to go over like and kind of expose you to the language of the prompts, what they tend to look like. All right, so I'm back on the smaller screen, um, but here we of course have the AP Macroeconomics free response questions, and here we go. So yeah, again we have our 1 hour time limit, 10-minute reading period. You don't have to um, devote those 10 minutes to reading, remember. Like you can use them however you want. You don't have to have a reading period. You can just write for all 55 to 60 minutes. But yeah, just know, and yeah, if you know that you don't have to waste time reading the directions, yeah. Well, I guess they do underline that you should probably spend half your time on the first question. But besides that idea, yeah, you probably don't have to read that, so long as you're familiar with the testing format, because it's consistent from year to year, um, or from the most recent years. So again, as I mentioned, the first question will almost always ask you draw a correctly labeled graph of, in this case, LRAS, SRAS, and aggregate demand curves showing these quantities. So make sure you're showing, like, and labeling these things especially. Of course, you still want to label your axes and every other pertinent detail of the graph, but especially these ones because this is what like they're specifically grading you on. So be sure to do that. And then they're kind of in the next parts getting you to explain the kind of effects on the economy given certain changes, perhaps in the graph itself. In this case, we're talking about a recession, and this gets into more like fiscal and monetary policy. So as you can see, it's partially graphical, analytical in nature, but also conceptual towards the end, as you're perhaps making some shifts in the graphs and analyzing things conceptually and graphically, which is consistent, hopefully consistent with what I've been sharing with you guys so far. So question 2 and 3, they're shorter FRQs. So here we have, again, so we're looking at the economy of some made-up land at full employment. Make sure you do pay attention to the directions like really carefully, because this full employment, that tells us, I mean, that reveals some pretty pertinent information. If you're taking the AP Macro exam, hopefully that sounds familiar. But yeah, and then the first question, Again, this is just conceptual, and here we see it once more. Draw a correctly labeled graph. I am telling you, you will see that everywhere on the exam. Most likely, well, I guess on the FRQs, not in the multiple choice. But yes, you're gonna want to know how to do that, and it's in the loanable funds market. So you're gonna want to know the graph for the loanable funds market, obviously. And then we have more explaining what happens in this case, like we're looking at, whoops. So like what is the effect of X on Y? And we want to explain that. Remember, don't over-explain, just give them just enough. Like you don't want to give them too much and then start contradicting yourself. Um, and you don't want to write a full essay for this. So just be very careful and deliberate in your explanations. And then the final exam gets into just some calculations. So like here we have, a conceptual explanation, and then B and C get into calculations. So make sure you know your formulas. In this case, you want to know the formula for the unemployment rate and the formula for the labor force participation rate. And you need to show your work to earn these points. Getting the right answer is not enough. If you do not have the work to support it, you will not earn the point. So be very careful with that. Just show your work. And then D, once more, would you look at that? Draw a correctly labeled graph. So really, just knowing your graphs really comes in handy with this exam. So if I could give you any word of advice here, please, please, please practice, practice, practice your graphs and know them like the back of your hand. It will do you good. All right, so now I'll move to the P micro for your response questions. Yep, see micro. Okay, so now let's go over some of the micro questions, or the 2018 micro FRQs. Same directions because it has the same format, which is convenient. So, okay, again, look at that. We have some, made up situation, and we have to, bet you never would have guessed, we have to draw a correctly labeled graph for single cinema and show each of the following. So make sure you actually show each of the following and are deliberately labeling them and showing them in your graph. Because this is what they're, again, explicitly grading you on. So make sure you label them. And make sure, too, I guess I didn't really explicitly mention this, but make sure you're labeling things exactly as they're telling you to. So, like, don't label the profit maximizing price and quantity as like PE, like for PE or QE, or don't do like P sub 1 or Q sub 1. You have to do P sub M and Q sub M. So make sure you're really taking the time to label things exactly as they're telling you to. Everything else you can label within reason, kind of whatever you want. You can, but like if they're giving you specific ways to label certain things, make sure you're actually doing it that way. And then another explain question. Really, all the the formats of all these questions are pretty similar. So you'll get used to the structure of the questions pretty quickly if you do some practices. And then another explain question, another conceptual question, and oftentimes you can use the graph you create in the first part to help you answer these conceptual questions. And then again, more what will happen, like what's the effect on this economic phenomenon on something else. So it's really, the questions are structured very similarly. Actually, I'm just gonna click that. Okay, now here, we don't necessarily have to create a graph here, I don't think. No, it doesn't look like we have to, but we have to interpret a graph. So again, graphs are very important for econ. So this is an identify question, but we do have to explain in order to earn the point. Notice the explain there. And then we're using data on the graph to explain various concepts. Deadweight loss here, that should be a familiar concept to you. And really not only knowing what these concepts are, like such as deadweight loss, but knowing how to calculate and interpret them if given in a graphical format, especially if you're taking the digital exams and you're not going to be actually drawing graphs, you're going to want to be able to interpret them because the FRQs, I'm betting you, will be something like this. I know on the AP micro exam that I took digitally last year, that was definitely the case. I had to interpret graphs, not necessarily draw them, because it'd be hard to do an online exam. drawing graphs online. So needless to say, I had to interpret graphs, so I'm guaranteeing you will too if you're taking the digital exam. And more conceptual questions, knowing price floors. Remember, price floors should be above, equilibrium. So just knowing, just conceptually, how to analyze this, and knowing your vocabulary, like such as deadweight loss and price floor, and the type of market failure, whatever that vocab term may be. Okay, I don't know why I keep doing that. I could just do it like that. Okay, and then this one just gets into units, believe it's 1 or 2 of the AP Micro exam, or AP Micro curriculum rather. It really has just everything to do with opportunity cost. So it's giving you a table here. So again, this gets back into the idea of just being able to analyze data when given, not necessarily just in a graphical format, but also in a tabular format like this. So it gives this made up situation where Nirali, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, is, I guess we're supposed to analyze the opportunity cost of her studying for 2 different exams, microeconomics and history in this case. So it's all about opportunity cost and, I guess in essence, again, profit maximization. I know it's not really profit in this case. I guess maybe profit in the sense that, in the sense of her exam score. But yeah, like part D here, again, it kind of gets at the idea of like profit maximization, like what should she do to maximize her score? So it's an important concept for micro, as I've mentioned. And yeah, this is really a bunch of conceptual and explanation based questions. We have marginal analysis, so make sure you're familiar with stuff like that. Hopefully that helps give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect come exam day for macro and micro. All right, so that's just about the last thing I have for you. I'd also say if you are taking the AP exam this year, you should have access to the AP Classroom and the AP Daily videos. If you're self-studying for AP Micro, you probably won't have access to the progress checks. I know for the AP exams I'm self-studying for this year, I don't have access to them, unfortunately, but the videos may be super helpful. Depends on, who's, the certain teacher or professor who's instructing, and leading the lesson. I know for sure for macro, I can't speak to micro because I'm not taking that this year and I haven't seen AP Daily videos, obviously. But for macro, I think if you're looking for extra clarification on the videos towards the end of Unit 2 and the beginning of Unit 3, Miss Rayfield's, I think, so far has done a really nice job explaining those, so I would go check those out too. They're great resources. Um, I think so far, like most of the videos I've watched have been pretty good, but Miss Rayfield's especially has been really helpful. Those videos have been really helpful for me. So look at those if you're able to do so, if you have access to them. But yeah. Other than that, just take a deep breath. You've got this, and best of luck to you. If there's any way that I can help out in helping you earn that 3, 4, or ultimately that 5 on the AP Micro and or Macro exams, please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I know clearly I'm not the greatest at responding to them in a punctual manner, as I have not posted a video in 7 months prior to today. So I will try my best to answer your questions, but yeah, I'd love to help if need be. Or if you have any other, how to earn a 5 on this AP exam video ideas for me, let me know. I know I've already been requested to do stuff for English language, I think computer science, and physics 1. And I think there may be some others that I'm missing, and I'm sorry if I am. I can look through the comments again to see. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And yeah, stay safe and take care.